This lens has largely flown under the radar since its release, but I think this lens represents a watershed moment in the budget lens market. This is a focal length that's hard to get right, and it requires an incredibly sophisticated optical design. And I think TT Artisans has done it pretty well. Essentially, they've given us a lens that performs on par or thereabouts in line with the first-party lens manufacturers or some of the more premium third-party lens manufacturers, but the lens costs about a third of the price of those comparable offerings. And I'd like to thank TT Artisans for sending this lens out to me for the purpose of making this video. It is a new release lens, which has been very popular and has been difficult to find, so I will put links in the description down below to the places that I have found it in stock, because as I said, it is a bit hard to find and it has been selling out. And the most important feature of any lens is the focal length. And this is a 10mm f2 lens. And that is going to give us a very immersive storytelling lens where both your photos and your videos are going to make the viewer feel like they are part of the scene. They are immersed in the image that you're showing them. And a lot of times we like to talk about a 50mm field of view on full frame or sort of around a 33mm field of view on a crop sensor camera as being what the naked eye or the natural eye would see. This is true as far as what the eye would focus on in the middle of an image, but it's certainly not true as far as what you can actually see when you're looking in an environment. When I'm here looking at the camera, I can see the camera, but I can see all the way out here, and I can see all the way out here. That is not the field of view that a 50mm or 33mm on a crop sensor camera is going to give you. An ultra wide angle lens like this is actually going to give you more of an immersive field of view that is similar to being in the environment you're in. And because of that, if you want to show somebody a cave hike you've done, or a canyon you've been through, or a city that you've been in, or an architectural masterpiece that you've been in, or a historic building, this is the lens that you would use for that purpose. You would use an ultra wide lens which captures that wraparound image, which puts that viewer in the environment that you're sort of trying to capture or show them. And that makes this an excellent lens for a whole range of different things, from architecture to landscape to cities and cityscapes, travel, vlogging. Anytime you're in a situation where you have an environment that wraps all around you and you want to give that viewer that immersive they were there type feeling, using an ultra wide lens is the way that you want to go. Now, this lens being a 10mm lens on a crop sensor camera is the equivalent to a 15 to 16mm lens in full frame terms. And if we look at the most popular wide angle full frame zoom lenses, you will find almost all of those start at 15 or 16mm. And for very good reason for that. This is a field of view that allows you to capture that very wraparound immersive image, but doesn't give you so much crazy distortion that the image looks completely unnatural. It still looks like an image that you might have seen with the naked eye. So if you're traveling or hiking or going through a forest, any sort of environment where that image is wrapping around you and you want to give somebody that immersive feeling, then I think this sort of ultra wide lens is the way to go. The other thing that's important about this particular lens, it is an ultra wide lens at 10mm, but it is also rectilinear. It is not a fisheye lens, so you don't get that bulbous barrel distortion. It keeps all the lines in your image straight, so everything looks a bit more natural and normal, not like a sort of GoPro style image. And although this is a budget lens, it's still an incredibly well-built lens. You've got an all-metal lens body, you have a polished metal lens mount, you have metal focus ring and metal aperture ring. The aperture ring is clicked, and the focus ring is very well dampened and smooth. In addition to that, it has a feature that I really haven't seen on any lens before, and that is it has a built-in lens hood. If we take this little piece off, it has a built-in lens hood that you can use with a push-on plastic lens cap if you want to use the lens like that. But it also has this additional little, I think you would call this maybe a lens hood, but it's actually a filter holder which will accept a 77 or 72mm filter thread, and then it comes with a screw-on lens cap for that. Now, I know a lot of people don't like these screw-on lens caps from the TT Artisan lenses. I've kind of gotten used to them and I kind of like them. They aren't quick and it does make you slow down, but I actually don't mind that when I'm doing photography. It just kind of slows things down a bit and I kind of enjoy it, but it's probably not everybody's cup of tea, but you do have that push on cap option. So it's nice. It comes with both options. This is a manual focus, manual aperture lens, and it has no electronic contacts with the camera whatsoever. That means you have to set the aperture with the aperture ring and you have to focus with the focus ring. Now, if you're afraid of manual focus lenses, I want to let you know that a wide lens like this at 10 millimeters, the wider the lens, the deeper the depth of field. That's the depth of the image that is in focus, meaning that super wide lenses are actually exceptionally easy to get focus with. This lens is going to come in all the popular mirrorless mounts. It is an APS-C lens, so it doesn't cover a full frame sensor, and it will also work on micro four thirds cameras. And I will put some links in the description down below to all the individual mounts that you can find down there, as well as the current pricing. Looking at the distortion performance on this lens, this is probably one of the most impressive things about this lens. At 10 millimeters, that's an incredibly wide field of view, which can be very challenging to straighten those lines back out after you've brought in this really wide image. And it's something that it requires an incredibly sophisticated optical design, which TT Artisans has absolutely nailed. There is almost no distortion whatsoever. I would say there is the tiniest a bit of barrel distortion, but all the images you've seen have not been corrected, and I have not felt the need to correct any of them. I'm sure there will be a Lightroom profile to correct it in time if you want to do so, but honestly, the lines are so straight that it's pretty much irrelevant. The lens does exhibit some reasonably heavy vignette performance, and I don't think it fully goes away even when it's stopped down. I don't think this is really a problem, and when you have this huge wide field of view, you probably want to draw attention to the things that are more in the center of frame anyways, because as they get to the side of frame, they get more and more stretched, so you're not going to be putting subjects out at the side of frame either. But this is something that you can easily correct in Lightroom, and the vignette is pretty consistent, so just a slight slider correction for vignette should sort that out. Looking at chromatic aberration, there really is surprisingly little chromatic aberration, a tiny bit in the corners wide open, but you don't get any purple fringing in the center of frame on contrasting edges. And there wasn't a single image that I captured that I felt like was ruined by the chromatic aberration. And looking at the longitudinal chromatic aberration, which is color fringing before and after the plane of focus, I'm not really seeing any issues there. It is really a pretty clinical performance and an extremely impressive performance for a lens of this price point. Looking at flare, this is probably the single biggest step up that TT Artisans has made on this lens. In the past, the single biggest issue with all of the lenses they produced has been the flare performance. And love it or hate it, you often got some really crazy and wild flares. I think this mostly related to the technology for the lens coating. The flare performance in this lens is excellent, and I think it's on par with a lot of first-party lenses. One real surprise about this lens was the sun stars. This is something I don't normally even cover in lens reviews because it's not something I worry too much about, but this thing gives you these really cool sun stars really early in the aperture range, which is really cool because it allows you to shoot at night with sort of street lights and headlights and stuff and get these really cool sun star effect while still letting a lot of light in. A lot of lenses you have to really stop down to sort of, f8, f9, f11, something like that to really maximize the sun stars. This one will give you sun stars very, very early on. So you can really get that cool photography sun star effect while still letting a lot of light in to hit the sensor. The lens does give you some great close-up image quality. Now, I do wish that the lens focused a little bit closer than what it does, something more like the Rokinon 12mm f2, which you can focus very close, and with that wide field of view, you get these really dramatic images. But the close focus isn't bad. It's reasonably close, but not as close as I would like in an ideal world. But when you do use the close focus on the lens, it is excellent. The images are sharp and detailed, and you still get kind of a very dramatic, interesting looking image. Even at times, I felt like these close-up wide-angle images of everyday things even kind of had a dramatic cinematic look. So although I wish it would focus a little bit closer, the images are fantastic at the close minimum focus distance. And looking at sharpness and detail, the sharpness and detail out of the lens is excellent. It is very good starting at f2, absolutely usable, and I shot, I would say, even the majority of my images at f2. If you want a little bit more sharpness, you can stop down to f2.8, and at that point you have a razor sharp image through the rest of the range up to probably f11 or getting towards f16, where you start to get diffraction creeping in. The corners, as I said, are not ultra sharp, but importantly, the edges of frame are sharp. And I think that's actually far more important than the corners of the image, because you will rarely put a subject or something that you're trying to draw the viewer's eye to in the extreme corners. And having a look at bokeh, the bokeh quality is nice and pleasing. It's not dramatic and blow me away. At 10 millimeters and f2, you're not going to get the most out of focus background. And because you can't get super close to your objects, you can't really blow that background out too much. But when you do, it's fine. It's absolutely smooth and pleasing, and I don't have any problems with the quality of the bokeh. This is absolutely a storytelling lens for travel, for cities, for canyons, for caving, for any time you're in even a historic building, cities. Anytime you're in an immersive environment, and in the past you've come away with your photos and said, this just doesn't really tell the story. Most of the time, that's because you did not get a wide enough field of view to make the viewer feel part of that photo or video. At 10 millimeters, that is what you're going to be doing with your images. You are going to give you an immersive, I'm there type look. Now, 10 millimeters is a very specific use wide angle immersive focal length. And if you're not into that sort of wide angle photo and video, I've just thrown a video on screen now. This is TT Artisan's less than $200, 27 millimeter f2.8 autofocus lens. And if you're after a very, very cheap all-purpose autofocus lens, then I would suggest you check out that video.